The Specter of Communism in Hawaii, 1947 to 1953. Chapter 11, Hawaii's Politics, 1950. A rift in the ranks of the Democratic Party was not unanticipated. As early as December 1949, the party had established a harmony group consisting of two pro-Steinback men, Harold Rice of Maui and Foreman Thompson of the Big Island, and two anti-Steinback men, Chuck Mao of Oahu and Takechi Miyamoto of Maui. The peacemaker among this group of Democratic Territorial Central Committee members was Ernest N. Heen of Oahu. But harmony was not to last, even among the members of this coalition. By the end of February 1950, the Harmony Committee had made three basic decisions. First, Harold Rice, former Maui senator and Princeton classmate of Governor Steinback, would run as the Democratic Party's candidate for delegate to Congress. Second, Governor Steinback would be induced to accept a position on the Territorial Supreme Court. And third, a native son would be endorsed by the party for governor. But these recommendations of the Harmony Committee were not unanimous. Foreman Thompson of Hilo opposed them. And when the deal was leaked to the press, there was anger within the Harmony group over the leak to the press and outside the Harmony group over the proposed deal. The arrangement was probably doomed from the start due to the vagueness of the third proposition, that a native son be endorsed for governor. To many, the natural fulfillment of this proposition would be the endorsement of Mayor Johnny Wilson, a Hawaiian political institution in his own right and anathema to Governor Steinback. Wilson was personally impregnable, but his enemies adopted the strategy of attacking the mayor through his controversial administrative assistant, W.K. Bassett. Footnote: we have already seen, in Chapter 10, the way in which Mayor Wilson was attacked during the HUAC hearings in 1950 through his controversial administrative assistant, W.K. Bassett. Footnote end. During the 1949 dock strike, Bassett had been openly critical of Governor Steinback and the Dock Seizure Act. He was also openly critical of the United States government in its prosecution of the Smith Act case in New York, which had resulted in guilty verdicts for all 11 defendants on October 14, 1949. On October 27, 1949, the right-wing Democrats in the 10th Precinct Club of the 4th Representative District on Oahu ousted Bassett as the club's president and voted resolutions supporting Judge Medina in the Smith Act case and Governor Steinback in the dock strike action taken by the territorial government. While the Democratic Party was making futile efforts to achieve harmony, the territory of Hawaii turned to the task of writing a constitution which, it was hoped by most, would serve the people of the nation's 49th state. The election of delegates to the Constitutional Convention, nominally a nonpartisan contest, did not create significant tensions within the Democratic Party, though it did generate protest within the ranks of the ILWU. It was primarily a celebration of the Republican Party's political control of the territory of Hawaii. But the Democratic Party's precinct club elections, 2.5 weeks later, on April 6, 1950, were a different matter. In these elections, the work of the left-wing Democrats at the grassroots level paid off and guaranteed that the anti-Steinback forces would control the coming Territorial Democratic Party convention. The Honolulu Record, surveying the magnitude of the left-wing victory, reported that one Big Island delegate declared, "There are only 2 delegates to the convention from the whole island we think might vote for the governor." Regarding Kauai, the record reported that some have said the anti-Steinback representation may be as high as 90%. Maui was reported to have a substantial anti-Steinback majority, as did Oahu's 4th and 5th districts. In the governor's own precinct, the 21st of the 4th, a resolution was passed demanding that Steinback not be reappointed. Efforts were made by Hawaii's 2 Democratic National Committee members, Charles Kahane and Victoria Holt, to gain permission from the National Committee to reorganize Hawaii's Democratic Party. Governor Steinback even called a meeting of 20 friendly party leaders at Washington Place, the governor's mansion, to discuss the chances of postponing the territorial convention. This meeting took place on April 24, 1950, 4 days after the conclusion of the HUAC hearings in Honolulu, and was a reflection of the way in which those hearings had exacerbated the rift in the Democratic Party. And when the Territorial Democratic Convention met on April 30, 1950, 14 delegates and 2 alternates were among the reluctant 39, the group which had refused to testify before HUAC and had been cited for contempt by the committee for their unwillingness to cooperate. These delegates provided the issue which finally tore the party apart. On the eve of the Territorial Democratic Convention, the Honolulu Advertiser and the Honolulu Record demonstrated the disparity of views about the Democratic Party which existed in the territory. Both spoke in tones of rather cautious optimism, but in a very different way. The Advertiser, Hawaii's Democrats meeting and territorial convention today face a dual responsibility, an obligation to the political party whose principles they profess and an equal duty to the people of Hawaii to preserve the two-party system of government. If the delegates allow themselves to be subjugated to the left-wing elements who took over their party machinery in 1946 and have been striving to establish rule or ruin of Hawaii's democracy ever since, they will fail on both counts. There is more hope that reason and party loyalty will prevail in this convention than was shown 4 years ago. Then the schemers were able to pose as labor leaders who had the confidence of a large section of Hawaii's wage earners. That pose carries no conviction today. Rank and file members of the ILWU have seen these self-elevated leaders exposed as political manipulators, defiant of the American people and their principles, and under a cloud with their own national CIO parent organization. They have seen these leaders working their own interests, employing the tactics of the Communist Party line, defending convicted communists, and devoting their energies to gaining political power rather than to the welfare of labor. The record, during the past few years the Democratic Party has taken on a semblance of a real political party based on active precinct clubs. A great deal of planning, organizing, and legwork were required. Some of those who gave unstintingly of their time and effort to build the party are today under attack. The Big Five employers, their associates, and the Republicans want nothing more than to see the Democratic Party split many ways. It is said the red issue will be brought up Sunday at the convention as a move to oust those labeled communists. The last convention in 1948 weathered the same storm, and this convention evidently will too, with liberals holding the party together. A walkout was precipitated by a motion by Morris Sapienza, a right-wing delegate, to deny seats to 15 of the 16 delegates and alternatives who were among the reluctant 39. The 16th, Jack Kawano, was not being asked to leave by the right-wingers because he had categorically denied being a member of the Communist Party before HUAC, though he refused to answer other questions about his associations with others and was, therefore, cited for contempt along with the rest of the reluctant ones. When Sapienza's motion failed, Ernest N. Heen and Harold Rice led 91 delegates controlling 118 of the 510 floor votes, including proxies, out of the auditorium at Kalakaua Intermediate School and into their own convention at the American Legion Hall. After the right-wing Democrats had walked out, John A. Burns was unanimously elected chairman of the convention and a rising young figure in the Democratic Party. Vincent Esposito declared, "This is the new Democratic Party." Esposito's rhetoric proved to be prophetic, for it was out of the left-wing coalition which remained at the Kalakaua Intermediate School in 1950 that the political revolution of 1954 was fashioned. Though the walkout Democrats saw themselves as the enemies of communism within the party, it did not follow that the stand-pat Democrats, as they were called by some, saw themselves as communism's friends. They proceeded to pass 6 resolutions, the latter 3 of which were to prove that point. First, they endorsed Johnny Wilson for governor. Second, they condemned the administration of Governor Steinbach. Third, the seats held by Charles Kahane and Victoria Holt on the Democratic National Committee were declared vacant. Fourth, they passed a resolution supporting the Truman administration. Fifth, they declared their support of the Marshall Plan. And sixth, they passed a resolution condemning communism. Whatever the persuasion of the left-wing Democrats might be, the right-wing Democrats had walked out. To them, it was a matter of principle. To Frank Marshall Davis, a black writer for the Honolulu Record, it looked different. In many ways, Davis said, the Sunday walkout was a replica of the 1948 National Democratic Convention when a number of Southern delegates got tired of democracy. After the split, Governor Steinbach gave his sanction to the walkout Democrats by phone from the mainland, as did Representatives Francis Walter, Democrat from Pennsylvania, and Morgan Mulder, Democrat from Missouri of the House Committee on Un-American Activities. Acting Governor Orrin E. Long, whom the author once heard described as a man who always picked things up by the smooth handle, spoke to the bolting group of Democrats at the American Legion Hall as a peacemaker. A development of this kind sometimes is essential, and such developments have the possibility of building a much stronger Democratic Party. But let us be careful of labels and name-calling. Let us be certain that we keep in our ideal of democracy that which will make Americans of great diversity of opinion feel at home. 7. But the walkout Democrats were more interested in the reorganization of the Democratic Party along lines acceptable to them than making peace. After Ernest Heen and Harold Rice were elected co-chairmen by acclamation, a committee was appointed to draft a statement enumerating the reasons for their action. This committee consisted of Hyman Greenstein, Morris Sapienza, Arthur Trask, Foreman Thompson, and William Miles. A formal statement, however, only repeated that which had already been said. The more subtle factional struggles within the party would be articulated only in backroom discussions. The expression of the right-wingers' public reason for the walkout reached its ultimate expression in a letter from Harry Cronick, right-wing advisor to the Young Democrats, to William Boyle, chairman of the Democratic Party's National Committee. Cronick told Boyle, "There can be no flag of peace flying the hammer and sickle. We can make peace and reorganize the party with fellow Democrats, not with fellow travelers. The left wing of the Democratic Party quickly named Chuck Mao chairman of the Territorial Central Committee, replacing the controversial Lao Achu, and proceeded to go to work establishing itself as anti-communist. John Burns remained chairman of the Oahu County Central Committee, but Wilfred Oka was replaced as secretary of the county committee by a young war veteran fresh out of law school, Daniel Enoy. Addressing themselves to the specific issue which had caused the split at the convention, the left-wing Democrats announced on May 9, 1950 that the 15 delegates whose seats had been contested would be required to sign the following affidavit, or be brought to trial by the party, and, if found guilty, would be expelled from the party. A request has been made of me by Takechi Miyamoto, a member of your committee, that I again inform the Democratic Party that I am not a member of the Communist Party. Obviously, this request is prompted by my refusal to testify before the House Un-American Activities Committee on the advice of my attorneys as to whether or not I am now, or ever have been, a member of the Communist Party. While I believe that my application for membership in the Democratic Party should be sufficient proof that I hold membership in no political party other than the Democratic Party, and while I believe that the Democratic Party should be fighting more vigorously in defense of our Bill of Rights, I am compelled to recognize that a refusal to comply with your request might damage the public position of the Democrats in these trying times. Therefore, I repeat, although reluctantly, that the only political party to which I belong is the Democratic Party and that I support and will continue to support its platform and principles. I am not a member of the Communist Party. Takechi Miyamoto, who was given the responsibility of obtaining the affidavits from the 15 Democrats in question, had been an active Democrat since 1918 and had been a member of the Territorial Democratic Central Committee for 30 years. The letter, obviously a carefully worded compromise document, had been approved unanimously by a committee 4 of whose members were required to sign it. Detractors were quick to point out that the letter did not address itself to the question of whether the affiant had ever been a member of the Communist Party. But the committee made it explicitly clear that failure to sign the letter would be interpreted as admission of the truth of the charges. The right-wing Democrats' reaction to the affidavit was predictable. Charles Kahn challenged Miyamoto's right to obtain the affidavits, adding that as chairman of the Territorial Legislature's Holdover Un-American Activities Committee he would welcome anyone who was willing to come in and purge himself of communist taint. Leon K. Sterling, S.R., echoed Kahane's statement, adding that he took umbrage with the word reluctantly in the affidavit. Why should anyone, Sterling asked, be reluctant about signifying his political affiliation? If you take out the although reluctantly and put in emphatically I might believe them, Victoria Holt was more blunt, saying the affidavit was worth less, not worth the paper it's written on. Having been thwarted in their efforts to reorganize the Democratic Party locally, the right-wing Democrats sought the sanction of the Democratic National Committee to do so. But first, Charles Kahane and Victoria Holt had to defend their right to their seats on the National Committee. The left-wing Democrats had declared their seats vacant and had appointed Johnny Wilson and his secretary, Harriet Magoon, to replace Kahane and Holt, who had been elected to a 4-year term in 1948. The National Committee, which met in mid-May in Chicago, was not about to get itself involved in a factional dispute in Hawaii. Kahane and Holt were seated without any consideration of the merits of the Hawaiian dispute. National Chairman Boyle pointed out that only death or resignation would have created a vacancy, adding in a purely rhetorical fashion that Hawaii's 2 National Committee members should return to Hawaii with the purpose of building a unified Democratic Party. Torn from context, Boyle's plea for harmony became a mandate for the reorganization of the party in the minds of Kahane and Holt. In the eyes of the Honolulu Advertiser, it was a warning to all Democrats in Hawaii that they are expected to clean house in their local organization. The usually unflappable Johnny Wilson, when confronted with the Kahane-Holt interpretation of Boyle's innocuous statement, bristled, "They are going to have one hell of a time reorganizing the party when they get back. Our precinct clubs are already organized, and they are not going to reorganize." Thus the reader gained the impression that the people of Hawaii were living in a seething cauldron of political frenzy. It should be pointed out that when the Honolulu Elks Club held a giant rally to cap its Wake Up America Week activities in La Mona Park on May 19, 1950, the rally had to be scrapped when the speakers, which included Samuel Wilder King, President of the Constitutional Convention, the Reverend Henry P. Judd, and spokesmen from the Army and Navy, nearly outnumbered those who came to listen. IMUA, the loudest organizational anti-communist voice in the territory of Hawaii, chose the same moment in Hawaii's struggle over the issue of communism to launch a fundraising campaign to finance our educational program against communism, socialism, and all other un-American, subversive activities. The campaign was approved by the Honolulu Chamber of Commerce, the Honolulu Better Business Bureau, and J. Edgar Hoover, among others. Hoover, in a letter apparently solicited by IMUA, said, "It is heartening to note that the communist conspiracy is daily being subjected to the pitiless glare of publicity. As I have said many times, communism cannot thrive out in the open where it can be seen and measured by the American public. The work which your Hawaii Residents Association, IMUA, is doing will undoubtedly help expose the true menace of communism." It is significant that IMUA never reported the results of this fundraising campaign. In a 1975 interview with Tony Tadero, a leading writer for IMUA during the early 1950s, the author speculated that the reason there was no public report was because IMUA was disappointed in that the organization never developed a broad base of community support, that although well-financed, IMUA was the creature of a small segment of Hawaii's business community. Tadero fully confirmed this analysis. 15. This lack of public support for a virulent brand of anti-communism was undoubtedly the reason why the efforts of the right-wing Democrats to reorganize their party failed. On June 5, 1950, the walkout Democrats called upon all true Democratic Party members to re-register during the period from June 10 through July 10. Applications were available through Leon K. Sterling, S.R., who was, conveniently, both chairman of the right-wing version of the Territorial Democratic Central Committee and city clerk. Sterling, who wrote the statement, said he did further proclaim that no one is authorized to solicit or accept funds, or to incur any indebtedness in the name of the Democratic Party unless authorized by me. John Burns called Sterling's move an attempt to rule by minority. However, the Sterling ploy did not work, and by the end of the month-long campaign, John K. Akow, Jr., was able to report only 1,181 membership cards had been processed, far short of the goal of 10,000 which had been sought. By mid-July, both wings of the party were in a state of disarray. The right-wingers were arguing over the question of whether they had walked out, at least in part, over the issue of supporting Governor Steinbach for reappointment. William E. Miles, president of the 33rd Precinct Club of the 5th Representative District on Oahu, declared that it was understood beforehand that the walkout was not to cover endorsement of the governor or any other action except to protest the seating of the 15 challenged delegates. Miles not only announced that he was leaving the right-wing faction, but that he was taking his 130-member club with him. Miles and his followers were among the many Democrats who, in essence, sat out the 1950 elections. Arthur K. Trask, who had been a part of the original walkout group, complained that when he asked the 30-member right-wing organizing group to work in the direction of party unity, he had been shouted down. Trask took another walk. In the meantime, the left-wing Democrats had expelled 5 of the 15 challenged delegates to the Territorial Democratic Convention for failure to sign the required affidavit. Rachel Seki, John Akana, Tadashi Agawa, Ben Kahawinui, and Levi Kilo. A 6th, Adele Kensinger, had resigned from the party. The 9 who had signed were Yasuki Arakaki, Thomas Yagi, Kamio Ikamura, Robert K. Murasaki, Shijitake Moto, Robert Kunimura, Wilfred Oka, Yukio Abe, and Fred Kamahohoa. But now, in mid-July, there was a drive to obtain a less equivocal loyalty statement and to have it required of all 30 Democrats who were among the reluctant 39, not just the 15 delegates to the Territorial Convention. The new affidavit was short and to the point. To whom it may concern, I am not a communist. I am a member of the Democratic Party of Hawaii. I endorse the principles of the Democratic Party and pledge my undivided support of its rules and platforms. What was left of the right-wing organization in early August unanimously pledged themselves to submit any plan for party reconciliation to Francis Walter of HUAC for his approval. A group of right-wing Democrats who called themselves the Young Turks met with Governor Steinbach on August 14, 1950, and reported with pleasure that the governor declared that he would have nothing to do with any Democratic Party organization that failed to purge any and all of the reluctant 39 from its ranks. The National Democratic Party kept its hands off the Hawaii situation, and when President Truman was required to select 2 circuit court judges for the territory of Hawaii, he did so with great circumspection. The president tapped Chuck Mao, one of the left-wing leaders, and Morris Sapienza, one of the right-wing leaders. While the Truman administration sought to be even-handed, others on the national scene were less so. Whereas Morris Sapienza was quickly approved by the Senate, the nomination of Chuck Mao was bottled up in the Senate Judiciary Committee by Senator Pat McCarran, Democrat from Nevada. McCarran, of course, was vigorously anti-communist. The Internal Security Act of 1950, though a lineal descendant of the Munt-Nixon bill, bore McCarran's name. McCarran, a longtime supporter of Steinbach's, delayed Mao's confirmation into 1951, and there is no doubt that it was directly related to McCarran's efforts on behalf of Steinbach's reappointment. In a letter to Secretary of the Interior Oscar Chapman, McCarran said, "About the most complete communist organization that I have yet encountered, I found to exist in the Hawaiian Islands." It was not at all strange that this group was working actively to embarrass and, if possible, to defeat the reappointment of Governor Steinbach. They are undoubtedly still at it from all that I can learn, and the fact that Governor Steinbach has not been reappointed is water on the communist wheel. To be very frank with you, Mr. Secretary, I am sick and tired of this placating and appeasing communist organizations and communist fronts, and I don't think it behooves your department or the administration to indulge in it. As the 1950 political campaign got underway, there were efforts to achieve at least some surface unity. The right-wing Democrats endorsed Chuck Mao's nomination as a circuit court judge. The two county committees merged into one, though the territorial central committees did not. An effort was made to have Senator Herbert K.H. Lee, an uncommitted moderate, head up a campaign committee with John K. Akow and John Burns as his deputies, but that fell apart, and on September 13, 1950, Norman Godbold assumed the thankless job. Tommy Wong, a candidate for the territorial house from the 5th District on Oahu, expressed the frustration of many Democrats when he announced that he would run an independent campaign, not wanting to be associated with the party split the way it is now. There was no candidate with any taint of communism running for office in 1950. In a column titled Political Notes, a bulletin reporter observed, "The anti-communist theme is down but not out in the Republican campaign strategy. Chairman Randolph Crossley has put the slogan, 'Sell the Republican Record of Achievement,' in the #1 spot." But in almost every speech recently he also has reminded the voters that the Republican Party is the only one that's free of any suspicious taints. Thus the shift away from the Vote American, Vote Republican theme that had the Democrats tearing their hair in 1948 is not as pronounced as first anticipated. The only race in the Democratic primary contest of October 7, 1950, which had any dramatic overtones relevant to the party struggle dating back to the Territorial Democratic Convention of the preceding April, was the mayor's race in which Supervisor Ernest N. Heen challenged Johnny Wilson. Wilson's victory over Heen by a margin of 15,608 to 10,058 should not, however, be looked upon as a vindication of anything beyond Wilson's personal popularity on the Hawaiian political scene. In spite of his victory, Johnny Wilson was in a surly mood. Commenting upon the poor Democratic showing, Wilson blamed the walkout Democrats. "The price we have had to pay for that foolishness is too high." Wilson went on to win the general election over the Republican attorney James Gilliland by more than 12,000 votes. The Truman administration remained on the fence over the issue of Steinbach's reappointment until the following spring. It was not until May 8, 1951, that Orrin E. Long was rewarded for his able, non-controversial service to the people of Hawaii by becoming President Truman's designee for the governorship of the Territory of Hawaii. The Truman administration hoped that Long could find a smooth handle with which to pick up the dissension-ridden Democratic Party of Hawaii. Hawaii's politics did not exist, of course, in a vacuum. There were events of immense national and international importance that transpired during the summer and fall of 1950, leaving their mark on the territory. The most significant event was the beginning of the Korean War on June 25, 1950. Beyond the obvious impact the Korean emergency would have on Hawaii as a center of military activity in the Pacific, the territory's perceptions of the situation were affected by the fortunes of Harry Bridges, the leader of Hawaii's largest union. In April 1950, Bridges had been convicted of perjury for having lied about his membership in the Communist Party at the time he became an American citizen in 1945. That conviction was being appealed when, on June 16, 1950, 9 days before the beginning of the Korean War, Bridges' citizenship was revoked. The implementation of the order revoking Bridges' citizenship was postponed pending the outcome of his appeal of the perjury conviction. With the onset of the Korean War, Bridges became an outspoken critic of the United States' United Nations intervention and actively supported the so-called Stockholm Peace Petition. The Stockholm Peace Petition was seen by the United States government as a move by Moscow to undermine the efforts of peace-loving nations who had sprung to the defense of the South Koreans. Bridges' opposition to the Korean War generated great pressures on himself and his union. On August 2, 1950, Bridges found himself back in the San Francisco courtroom of Judge George B. Harris, the man who had presided over his perjury trial, asked to show cause why his bail should not be revoked. Speaking in his own defense on August 4, 1950, Harry Bridges said, "I am against the war. If I cannot speak my opinion on war, I might as well go to jail now." The next day, Judge Harris ordered bail revoked and sent Harry Bridges to jail. In his decision, the judge said that Bridges has spearheaded a serious opposition to security measures, solely for the purpose of protecting the Communist Party and his communist cohorts within the Union. Judge Harris concluded by saying, "The Army, Navy, and Marine Corps will hold the beachheads in Korea. Our duty is to protect the beachhead here from dangers to the internal security of the United States. I am satisfied to a moral certainty and beyond reasonable doubt that Bridges was and is a member of the Communist Party. I am also led to believe that he is one of the most potent figures in the Communist Party in America today. As such, he is an agent of the Communist Party, and as an agent, his allegiance cannot be to America.